Good evening. My name is Edward Sanchin Oberholzer. I'm the resident priest and guiding teacher of the Joseph Priestley Zen Sangha. We're an affiliate of Empty Moon Zen. There are impossible tasks in this life. Squaring the circle, figuring out how many angels can dance on the head of a pin, understanding the instructions on the 1040 SR forms without resorting to TurboTax. Perhaps the most impossible is dealing with that first of all koans in our curriculum. Jiaozhou's dog, Jiaozhou's moo. Good God, how do you approach it? One of the later koans talks about a mosquito trying to bite an iron bull, an apt metaphor when you begin to work with koans. There's a wonderful cartoon image in the book Unsui by a Rinzai monk, Geto Nishimura. A monk is being dragged to Sanzen. We call it Doksan. Several monks have a hold of him on his body, and he's grasping desperately to a column in the zendo, trying his mightiest not to be dragged in before his teacher, knowing that the teacher will make that most impossible of demands. Show me Mu. As a former president was wont to say, I feel your pain. I've been there. I am there. Your pain and frustration is my pain and frustration. But here's the thing. The Dharma is vast and wondrous. I've been there. You've been there. People throughout the world. Zen practitioners have been there. Are there. Will be there. One of my favorite parts of the Dharma is that it's all around us, just waiting to be seen. One of those sightings took place for me a number of years ago when an old friend and fellow traveler on the way, Bob Waldinger, gave a Dharma talk at the Boundless Way Temple in which he read from a 19th century reminiscence from an entomologist. If you're looking for a hint, a gentle nudge on how to approach Mu, you'll find it here, in the dusty rooms of a laboratory in 19th century Harvard. It certainly resonated for me. For those of us on the koan path, may it strike a chord. For those of us sitting on a cushion, following our breath, may it also strike a chord. My teacher, James Ford, likes to say that there are 3 key instructions for Zazen. Sit down, shut up, pay attention. Here, in this unlikely place, though only unlikely if you expect the Dharma to be something special, here is a complete discourse on paying attention. In all its abbreviated and pared down glory, it is from the 19th century, after all. I'll spare you most of the verbosity. Here, Samuel Scudder's memoir, In the Laboratory with Louis Agassiz, begins. It was more than 15 years ago that I entered the laboratory of Professor Agassiz and told him I had enrolled my name in the scientific school as a student of natural history. He asked me a few questions about my object in coming, my antecedents generally, the mode in which afterwards I proposed to use the knowledge I might acquire, and finally, whether I wished to study any special branch. To the latter, I replied that, while I wished to be well-grounded in all departments of zoology, I proposed to devote myself specially to insects. When do you wish to begin? He asked. Now, I replied. This seemed to please him, and with an energetic, very well, he reached from a shelf a huge jar of specimens in yellow alcohol. Take this fish, he said, and look at it. We call it a hymulon. By and by, I will ask you what you have seen. With that, he left me. I was conscious of a passing feeling of disappointment, for gazing at a fish did not commend itself to an ardent entomologist. In 10 minutes, I had seen all that could be seen in that fish and started the search for the professor, who had, however, left the museum. And when I returned, after lingering over some of the odd animals stored in the upper apartment, my specimen was dry all over. I dashed the fluid over the fish, as if to resuscitate the beast from a fainting fit, and looked with anxiety for a return of the normal sloppy appearance. This little excitement over, nothing was to be done but to return to a steadfast gaze at my mute companion. Half an hour passes. An hour. Another hour. The fish began to look loathsome. I turned it over and around, looked it in the face, ghastly. From behind, beneath, above, sideways, at a three-quarters view, just as ghastly. I was in despair. At an early hour I concluded that lunch was necessary, so with infinite relief, the fish was carefully replaced in the jar, and for an hour I was free. On my return, I learned that Professor Agassiz had been at the museum, but had gone, and would not return for several hours. Slowly, I drew forth that hideous fish, and with a feeling of desperation again looked at it. I might not use a magnifying glass. Instruments of all kind were interdicted. My two hands, my two eyes, and the fish. It seemed a most limited field. I pushed my fingers down its throat to feel how sharp the teeth were. I began to count the scales in the different rows until I was convinced that that was nonsense. At last, a happy thought struck me. I would draw the fish, and now with surprise I began to discover new features in the creature. Just then, the professor returned. "That is right," said he. "A pencil is the best of eyes. I'm glad to notice, too, that you keep your specimen wet and your bottle corked." With these encouraging words, he added, "Well, what is it like?" He listened attentively to my brief rehearsal of the structure of parts whose names were still unknowns to me. The fringed gill arches and movable operculum, the pores of the head, fleshy lips and lidless eyes, the lateral line, the spinous fins and forked tail, the compressed and arched body. When I had finished, he waited, as if expecting more, and then, with an air of disappointment, "You have not looked very carefully. Why," he continued most earnestly, "you haven't even seen one of the most conspicuous features of the animal, which is as plainly before your eyes as the fish itself. Look again, and he left me to my misery." I was piqued. I was mortified. Still more of that wretched fish, but now I set myself to my tasks with a will and discovered one new thing after another until I saw how just the professor's criticism had been. The afternoon passed quickly, and when, towards its close, the professor inquired, "Do you see it yet?" "No," I replied. "I'm certain I do not, but I see how little I was before." "That is next best," he said earnestly, "but I won't hear you now. Put away your fish and go home. Perhaps you will be ready with a better answer in the morning. I will examine you before you look at the fish." The cordial greeting from the professor the next morning was very reassuring. Here was a man who seemed to be quite as anxious as I that I should see for myself what he saw. "Do you perhaps mean," I said, "that the fish has symmetrical sides with paired organs?" His thoroughly pleased, of course, repaid the wakeful hours of the previous night, After he discoursed most happily and enthusiastically, as he always did, upon the importance of this point, I ventured to ask what I should do next. "Oh, look at your fish," he said, and left me again to my own devices. In a little more than an hour he returned and heard my new catalogue. "That is good, that is good, but that is not all. Go on." And so for 3 long days he placed that fish before my eyes, forbidding me to look at anything else or to use any artificial aid. "Look, look, look," was his repeated injunction. So let's leave Samuel Scudder under the watchful eye of Louis Agassiz and return to our practice. I remember, though perhaps not fondly, taking my understanding of Mu into my teacher, a Mu loathsome and dripping with yellow, fishy-smelling alcohol, only to be told, like Scudder, "Look again, look again." If this is any consolation, Mu, like the fish, is always there. And Samuel Scudder did go on to a career in entomology. If Agassiz could have said, like, "Woman, don't you want to pass the barrier? Then concentrate yourself into this Mu with your 360 bones and 84,000 pores, making your whole body one great inquiry. Day and night, work intently at it. Do not attempt nihilistic or dualistic interpretations. It's like having bolted a red-hot iron ball. You try to vomit it up, but can't. So, sit down, shut up, and look, look.